Welcome everybody to the Straight Outta BS podcast. I want to thank you guys for your continued support. I also wanted to invite you guys to, I just am starting a new series on this channel. I'm still going to be doing all of the Survivor videos, so don't worry, those aren't going anywhere. But I'm also going to be starting a new series. I already have the first episode of it up. It's called Tales of Addiction and Recovery, and it's going to be for people who are either in active addiction, who have recovered from addiction, or who are trying to get clean from their addiction, to tell their stories. And I'm telling my story. I posted the first episode, which is essentially my background, and then I'm going to be going in this next part of the series on my story. It's going to be about my drug use, what drugs I used, the experiences I had, and then the third part is going to be about my recovery and where I'm at now. So just wanted to invite you guys to check that out. It's on this channel. And I'd like to do a moment of silence for the person still suffering with intrusive thoughts, addiction, anything like that. So on the count of three, I'm going to do a moment of silence. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you for that. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest for the day. Go ahead and introduce yourself and where you went, what year.
Hi, yeah, I'm Brett Harper. I went to Agape 99 to 03. And so, yeah, so Agape boarding school has been in the news a lot lately.
Yeah, I'm actually excited to do this interview. You're the first person that I've interviewed from Agape, so I'm very interested to hear what you have to say.
Oh, really? I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Were you transported, or what was the deal? How did you get up there?
I was transported. So I was in Oregon. I was in Prineville, Oregon at the time. And my dad, who's my adopted dad, Bill Harper, he had me transported from Prineville out to Agape. And I didn't know, I wasn't aware. I just came home from school and like all of a sudden there's transport agents that busted out of my bathroom and like showed me badges and said that my dad said that they were there to take me, to the boarding school, and they were like, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. And I was like, crap. So it's like, I'll just do the easy way,
Yeah.
but like, yeah.
Um, do you know why you got sent there? Like, I know obviously looking back, you probably know now, but like
Yep.
before you got sent there, did you have any, like, I know that you said they didn't tell you, but like, were you doing stuff that you probably knew you shouldn't be doing or something like that? Or was it a situation where your parent, because I've heard both sides, you know what I mean? I've heard troubled children getting sent there, and then I've heard people that do almost next to nothing getting sent to these places. So,
Right. And well, there's both there, right?
yeah.
I didn't have any criminal charges or anything. It's in a very sheltered, very Christian, very conservative home. And I mean, everybody has the right to believe what they want, but I think that the way I was raised was very stunted my growth and everything. But I had some issues with like arguing with my adopted dad a lot once I started to become like a teenager. And I think, looking back on it, I've done a lot of deep diving into like how I was reacting, what was going on. And a lot of it was pretty normal for a young teen to be acting out a little bit. But there's like a layer of trauma in there too. Like when I was 6 months old, my birth dad shot and killed my mom and my grandpa when I was in the crib. And so my theory is that I had childhood PTSD that went undiagnosed, untreated, and then my adopted dad was very abusive. He'd like choke me out, and like put hands on me and slap me around and like and stuff, and like tell me like he was a probation officer. He'd be like, "You want to be like my dirtbag clients?" And so like I think like I think it just had a lot of trauma there, and I think I was just reflecting back what he was throwing at me. You know what I mean? And it's not like a healthy way to deal with that, but as a teenager going through hormonal changes and everything, and then also having an undiagnosed mental health problem, I think that's what was going on. My parents did a whole bunch of weird stuff. They did like they brought me to an exorcist. So they were trying to
Okay.
get, yeah, I mean, like it was like that,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
so
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so you got transported there. What do you remember about like your first day or first few days there? Do you remember them going over rules with you? Do you remember them buddying you up with anybody? Anything like that?
Yeah. So the first day, I talk about it in my book, Spare the Rod, and also on my handles, my Spare the Rod handle and my Exposing Agape on Twitter. And on Facebook, there's an Exposing Agape. Anyway, I talk about it. Vanderkoy was the first person I met. He was Kelly Vanderkoy. And he's this big, 6'6", probably, ex-Marine, very bulky guy. And I just remember them dumping my bag out, and they were going rifling through things and throwing it in the trash, and like, you can't have this, you can't have that. And I was like, I said, hey, and I can't remember what I said after that, but I said something, and it was basically like, you can't do that or something. And I just
Yeah.
remember getting backhanded across, like getting the back of Vanderkoy's hand across my face and having to pick myself up off the ground. Like, he literally knocked me to the ground with the slap. And so I got up and I was kind of dazed, like, caught off guard. And he was like, "You don't talk to the owner like that." And I like immediately felt like this cold shiver down my spine, like, you're in a bad place. You know what I mean? And then like, it just kind of escalated from there, right? You got strip searched, got brought in, got put with a buddy. So I had to do the 3 foot rule. They had a buddy system at Agape where you have to be 3 feet from your buddy at all times. They teach you the rules, and they give you push-ups if you don't obey the rules or whatever. And yeah, and so if your buddy is like having a bad day, he might just like take it out on you too. You know what I mean? So it kind of creates this hierarchical system, which is really bad. Um, and so I remember boot camp was pretty hellish, and Vanderkoy went on to do another school called Pilgrim's Rest, which was just recently raided and shut down in Kentucky. So that guy's like, I don't know. Hopefully he's in a jail cell somewhere, but we're trying to figure out information. The cops aren't really giving us any information. A reporter contacted me to try and get information because they were stonewalling him. And so I don't know what happened really, but I know something about it, like a gay exorcism or some crazy stuff. And so, I mean, this is the people we're dealing with. And my dad, actually, Bill Harper, did touchdown transports. So to kind of loop back, I want you to be able to ask more questions. I don't want to keep just kind of rambling, but Bill Harper ran Touchdown Inc., which transported a bunch of people, even transported with Julio a few times. And Julio was in the newspaper, right, for that thing that happened with Agape. So yeah, there's a whole network of them, and they hire off-duty cops and people like that to transport kids in. And my dad made money off of my story. Like, hey, my son's in this program, yours might benefit too, and just like started transporting people for money.
That's messed up. Okay, so I know that Agape, because Agape was a religious school, right? What was
Yeah,
it?
yeah, it's still an operation for all I know. It seems like the uh, church is still there as well. It's under Agape Baptist Church, and it's a DBA,
Yeah.
or doing business as. Yeah.
Okay. Well, could you lay out like the the average, like what usually goes on in that kind of program? Because like for me, for example, like we had seminars and whatnot. Like, what was the archway of the program? Like, did they have points and levels? How did the program work?
Yeah, I can totally great question. I like these questions. Yeah, so you started off with the boot camp level I was just describing. You had a buddy, you're in an orange shirt, bright orange shirt. The idea, I believe, is that if you run away, it's Missouri, it's flat land, you're easy to see as this bright orange shirt. And then you're also hunter's orange, so hopefully you don't get shot. Because the
Yeah,
farmers out there kind of, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
so
sure.
kids would run away, and sometimes they get caught, and then they get brought back, and that was pretty intense. But anyway, so you go through boot camp, and the idea of boot camp was to break your will, right? You'd have PTs, or physical trainings, in the morning and in the evening, depending on how rebellious people were. Usually be like 45 minutes to an hour, but they always found ways to make it like double that because they would blame it on one person to make everybody kind of mad at that one person to create kind of pressure to do better. You know what I mean? So yeah, there is that kind of hierarchical system. Vanderquay is an ex-Marine, and so he very much reminded us of that. Like there'd be kids would be puking and passing out, and like I remember Scott Dumar was another guy. He was recently in the news, and he was charged with abuse, and he's doing the medical stuff, I guess, at Agape now and he was in my boot camp, and I remember just being in the what we call the Vander pit, which is the volleyball court, and in Missouri it gets super hot, right? And so the sand gets like molten lava hot, and they were having us like stay in push-up position and like do push-ups in it, and like just searing our hands, right? And running back and forth, and then like, and so we were in push-up position. I couldn't hold it anymore, and I collapsed. And Scott came up to me and started just calling me all kinds of names, and just kicked me in the side a bunch, and was like, "Get up!" Like, "Get up!" Yeah, like I ended up getting up, and there's a video out of like Burton kicking someone.
Yeah.
That's in the Vander pit. That's in the volleyball court. So you did that, and you did work crews. So you ran around and you picked up people's trash, and you laid foundations for staff housing that's now the group homes, I'm sure.
So you got free, essentially.
What?
Labor.
Free labor, yes. Child labor,
free
yes.
Child labor.
Free child slave labor, yeah. It's just like basically like we didn't get any benefit from it really. Sometimes you would get like little kudos, like they had these Agape bucks for like people that watched the door. So if you became a door guy, which I did at one point, I guess is the one thing I may regret a little bit, is that you just stand there or sit there and watch the door. Make sure nobody runs out the door, right? There's a magnetic lock on it anyway, but like they just, you know what I mean? And so like I did that for a little while, and they give you like coffee or whatever, or like hot chocolate or Agape bucks to get like a burger every once in a while, right? But I never really made it any farther than that because I couldn't kiss ass enough to go farther. Like I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Like I was like, like people, like the section leader people and stuff, and I didn't really want the responsibility of bossing people around, to be honest. I wanted my hot chocolate and my burger every once in a while. So they basically would do that, and then they would go in and do work for the townspeople sometimes with work crews, but not with the boot camp people. So boot camp is the first level. It's that Brown Town, as they called it after I left, I guess, or whatever. It's weird. Anyway, you get through that. Usually that takes 2 weeks to a month or two, depending on how stubborn someone is, and they feel they need to break them. And then you get into yellow shirt. And then the yellow shirt is like, you have a little more freedom, but you're still with a buddy. And you're not on boot camp, you can start school. But, you know what I mean? Like, you still, like, can go back to boot camp like that if you screw up too much. Yeah. And so then from there, you get off-buddy status into burgundy shirt, and then you would be a normal student. And then the burgundy shirt, from there, you go to a green shirt if you want to stay on the staff, or a gray shirt if you're like 18 and waiting to leave. I was like, I turned 18 and I was there for a couple of days so I could get a flight out. But I had already graduated. I told him straight up, I was like, I'm getting this stuff because it's PACES, right? They're ACE curriculum. I was like, if I don't finish this by the time I turn 18, I'm going to leave. So, you know what I mean? I was like, so that's how it works. And then they take people on work crews. They have horses. They have a horse business. They break horses out there with the boys. Yeah, it's kind of dangerous. And then a friend of mine got stepped on by a horse. That was, he was okay, but wow,
would they train them for that, or would they just kind of tell them what?
I mean, just tell them. Oh yeah. I mean, there's some personal injuries lawsuits now. There's like 23 of them now.
Yeah.
Coming out recently, and that's because the dam finally broke and the information's out and people are paying attention, and so now people feel comfortable coming forward. Back when I got out, I tried to get people to come forward, and the people were like, they just kind of laughed about it. They're like, no way. And then there was no internet like there is now. There was just like Yahoo chat and groups.
Yeah.
There wasn't like Facebook or Twitter, so we weren't able to gather together and really share information like we can now,
Yeah. So you were saying that, just for people that may not have heard, you have a handle, Spare the Rod. Is that your group on Facebook or whatnot? Go ahead and plug yourself. Like, let people know where they can find you.
Yeah. So www.sparetherodnp.com. So that's sparetherodnp for nonprofit.com. It is a nonprofit. It's an Oregon nonprofit. I registered it. I've got a couple people on the board. We don't really do too much. Right now, I've been kind of taking a break over the summer, but kind of doing stuff. I've been kind of focused on the Agape case, as it's been kind of a nail biter. But I've also been just kind of taking the time I need for myself. Now that the weather's a little colder and I'm inside all the time more, I'm planning on revamping my websites a little bit. But I also have some other ones. I have like healing.sparetherodnp.com, which is like a whole thing about videos about just how to decompress, meditate, imposter syndrome, anxiety, PTSD, bipolar disorder, ADHD, all these different things that a lot of us have, and how to like better cope with them and heal from them, and so that I started there was a group, and I like share stuff in the group, and then I put it on the website. Now I've got a resources.sparetherodnp.com, which I'm also working on and getting more stuff done on, and that uh, will have more local, state, and national resources people can go to when they're depressed, anxious, traumatized, homeless because they got out of T.T.I, they don't have family anymore, whatever it may be. Just trying to find ways to help the survivors and get the word out.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to do that before we got much further into the interview.
Spare the Rod, and then at Spare the Rod HQ on Twitter, exposing Agape, or like exposing Agape boarding school on Facebook. You should be able to find it through that, or just Google me, and then like also have my book, Spare the Rod, on Kindle and
Okay,
paperback.
cool. When we're done with this, also send me a link to your book, and then I'll put your information in my description.
Well, dude, I think it's even free to like read the book on Kindle Plus or whatever.
Well, that's even better. Yeah, just send me the link or whatnot.
So yeah, I'll send you that, and then yeah, it's pretty cheap.
Okay. Well, so there's essentially how many levels? 6 then?
So there's the boot camp level, there's the yellow shirt, there's the burgundy, and then I mean, gray is kind of like, yeah, I mean, you could go gray, green. Yeah. There was a blue shirt for a little while, but I can't remember why there was a blue shirt. I think blue shirt was like junior staff. I think blue shirt was, so maybe there's actually 6, because the blue shirt was like, because they would try to groom people into staying there. They tried to do it to me, and I didn't stay, luckily, but they'll try to like, you don't have really anything going on in life, right? So why don't you just stay here and work here with the kids? And they'll try to convince you it's like a noble cause and like all that too.
Yeah,
Uh,
of
and so
course.
yeah, so they give them a blue shirt until they're ready to give them a green shirt, I guess. It's kind of like a lower tiered staff. But yeah.
Okay. And it's interesting to me how they use the boot camp. Boot camp sounds similar to me, like just an extended period of the release process that they do in the seminars in the WASP schools. So it's very interesting to me because the whole point of the seminars is to break you down and build you back up into the kind of person they want you to be. So it's very interesting to me to see that comparison and see where their similarities are.
Oh,
Interesting.
totally. They used a lot of shame. Like I've done some looking at like the Synanon based more based like troubled teen industry versus like more religious based TTI. What I've noticed is that the Synanon type model, or like a more clinical or like psychological model, tends to have kind of like your more run of the mill like psychological games and stuff, whereas it's replaced with like religious shaming in the religious one. So it's like the same thing. It's just like a different tool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's like they, instead of religion and synonym based ones, they like do those raps and things I was looking at, and like that reminds me of how the pressure they would put on us, where if somebody was doing something wrong and we didn't say something, we could be in trouble too, or
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
different things like that. Yep.
Okay, so you graduated from the program? I heard you say.
Well, I mean, there's no graduating from it because it's a typical TTI, right? So you're not gonna ever graduate in the sense that like, oh, you're all better, you can go home now. But I graduated from high school there, yes.
Okay. And how long were you there?
I was there for almost 4 years, like 3.5, almost 4 years.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah,
so you got there when you were what, 14?
when I was 14, yeah, and I stayed till I was 18. So yeah,
Okay, you've been there 4 years, so I know you've seen a lot of stuff.
yeah,
Talk
unfortunately.
about talk to me about runners. What did they say? Anything specific about what happened to runners? Did you see any runners? What happened?
Oh yeah, I mean there was a few runners while I was there that came back even. They got away and came back. One of them got away. He got all the way to California, and he was away for a while. And like then he got in some fight or something, and like he got a brutal skull injury. And like when he came back, he actually had like a blood pump and everything, but he was back. And I was
Wow.
like, oh, that's intense. And yeah, I mean, like they made him like he still had to do stuff. Like it was it was disturbing. You know what I
Did,
mean? But yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just noting that like trying to think like who could do that to their kid, right? To be
Yeah.
like, is that kid was there because the parents sent him back? And I get that like he was in like some gang fight and that's what happened and that's why. But how are you gonna send your kid back to a boarding school still all messed up like that? I don't know.
Yeah. At least let him heal first, as fucked up as that is to say, but like at least, you know?
Yeah, this was kind of intense. And then I saw some other people run away, come back. Um, I mean, I think I can't think of a specific example, but I know that at least one of them had to have gotten away at some point and not come back. But they do usually get their runaways back.
Okay. Um, so was there junior staff there? I know you mentioned something about junior staff or something like that. Was there a level like that, like where you were essentially calling other students out on essentially policing the other
Yeah.
students? Was there anything
So
like that?
yeah, there's a section leader. So section leaders are like like a dormitory. We had like those metal bunk beds, like those,
Hmm.
and then like so, and then we'd have like what was it? I can't remember how many feet, but it wasn't very big. It was like basically a jail cell sized or smaller, like unit. And the section leader would go up and down the rows and like make sure that you had to like fold your bed at like a 45-degree angle and like some weird military stuff, and like, well, you had like two boxes to put all your stuff in, and you was very specific about what you could have, what you couldn't have, where you could put things, and so section leader would go up and down and make sure everything was perfect in the morning. They'd wake you up, to make sure that like yeah, like timed you at the sinks and stuff. So you'd have like a lineup to go into the sinks, and you had 3 minutes at the sinks, and like, if you had to like take a piss, I think it was like 2 minutes, and like if you had to take a dump, it was like 3 minutes or something, and showers like four, but or something like that. And so they would monitor you, and they'd stopwatch you and give you push-ups and stuff if you went over time.
Okay.
Yep.
So very similar, if not exactly the same thing they were doing at Spring Creek in the WASP programs. Interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
they're very similar to the W.W.A.S.P programs, and they're related to the roll-off programs because they have a roll-off dorm. They worship roll-off practically. So
yeah. I have to ask, how was the food there? Was it horrible? Was it okay? Like, how was it, man?
Honestly, it wasn't that bad. I helped in the kitchen sometimes. The food was not necessarily my problem with Agape. I obviously, looking back on it, they probably fed us some pretty cheap food sometimes. There was some times where kids would get put on salad for up to a week at a time. I thought that was pretty extreme. But I didn't see anybody starve necessarily. I did see a kid try to starve themselves. They happen every once in a while. Um, but that was. But yeah. So food was all right. It wasn't great, but it wasn't horrible. And yeah.
Okay. What would they have? What would somebody have to do to get put on salad only? I'm very curious about that.
So one of the things like they would do is kind of the kind of German etiquette. If like you don't eat it now, you'll eat it later, right? So they would like wrap your food and make you eat it the next meal, which would be really weird if you're eating like spaghetti for breakfast, right? But then they'd make you do that. And then sometimes people would get upset about that, so they wouldn't eat that either. And so like they weren't gonna feed them spoiled food, so then they'd put them on salad. And then like if they didn't eat the salad, they would just like kind of it would just basically be like an endless punishment of what I mean, putting them on salad until they
Yeah.
could eat the salad. And so then they could eat the salad, and sometimes they put them on salad. But by the time they put them back on food, maybe it's been a couple of days.
Yeah. Okay. Was there an intervention or study hall there?
Uh,
Essentially,
and
yeah. So essentially, solitary confinement would be intervention, and then worksheets was where in the WASP programs we had to go and write a certain number of like sentences, or we had to like write a certain number of
yeah.
words, and we couldn't leave until we did that.
Hey, you gotta be quiet. I'm in an interview. This is my cat, Athena. Yeah, they did have isolation. They had so most of the time they didn't put people in isolated rooms. They put them on the wall. They made them stare at the wall, and you'd have to stand it with your hands behind your back or at your side and stare at the wallpaper, and or like sit there and look at the wall. And you could be on a wall for a long time, or they put you on a wristband. Where they had this red wristband, and it was like a no talk status, and that meant nobody was to talk to you. You weren't allowed to play any board games or anything. But then again, we weren't allowed to talk to each other. Period, unless we had staff monitoring our conversations. And usually, the only time that they would do that is if we were playing board games or doing something, right? So. Uh, I don't know. A lot of times you just sat there, you did your homework, you did your schoolwork at the picnic tables that were in the dining hall, and that's kind of what you did. They had a paddle room, so sometimes kids would get brought up there, and they had a big paddle, and you would hear them screaming. And if I see kids come out of there not be able to sit down right afterwards, so I mean, yeah, definitely sometimes kids would get restrained, and what they would do is instead of putting a kid in like a ISO unit, they would restrain the kid there, but they would use like pressure points and stuff to inflict pain. So it's like a punishment, but they wouldn't let us watch. So if you watched, you got in trouble too, and sometimes you would get restrained too. Then, so like if somebody's getting restrained, everybody turns the opposite direction. It's like automatic. And you learn to do that right away. You're told to do that, which is pretty stark if you think about it. You know what I mean? But yeah. So uh, every once in a while, they would restrain someone in a room or something if it's just really out of control. But yeah,
Yeah.
I never
Okay.
went in one. Luckily, I tried to fly under the radar as much as I could. I got in some trouble every once in a while, but I really tried to stay out of trouble. So I was like, uh, yeah.
Okay. What was the hardest part of being there for you?
Ooh.
Like, if you had to choose one thing.
Hmm. I have to say that I felt I felt abandoned. I felt um really alone. I felt I felt thrown away. I think that that discarded field was probably the hardest to deal with. Like, okay, family just gave up on me. They just like instead of getting me into like and this really like uh has 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 been something I've thought about in adulthood, and it, with therapy and everything, and I think it's probably true. They didn't know what to do. Then they didn't want to go ask the right people, right? And
Yeah.
so that was what they did. They just kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater, and so that was probably the hardest part of it.
Okay. And how would you deal with stuff like that that was really hard for you in the program? Like, what, because for example, me, I would like, whenever I could, uh, we weren't supposed to, but we would like write lyrics with each other. Like, I'd have a journal and then I'd go and remember part of this song, and then I'd be like, hey, what was the rest of that song? And so I do stuff like that. I'd have conversations with people at night. And just like the friendships and the relationships that I made in there were really strong and they helped me get through it. So, like, what helped you the most get through the tough times in the program?
Yeah, I had a buddy named Hudson, and we call each other by our last names, and he was pretty cool. I had a couple of buddies in there, but we played Risk. I played a lot of Risk and like a lot of board games with people, and get kind of competitive. And I played some street ball, some basketball with some of the guys, and I worked in the kitchen, so we like the guys that worked in the kitchen were a little closer to each other. I was on the ensemble team with Blake. So I traveled around with a couple of guys singing. That got that that was helpful because I got to get out a little bit more, I guess, than
Yeah.
most. And like if you're gonna be there a long time, I guess you might as well be able to get some fresh air every once in a while. And so I mean, there's little things like that that made it a little better, but man, it was tough. And afterwards, my back broke when I was 18. I have sciatica. I've had two back surgeries, and in there I was hurting. I was telling them my back was hurting, and they weren't. They didn't seem to care, and so that was kind of a hopeless feeling. You're like, I shouldn't. I'm like a teenager. My back shouldn't hurt this bad, and nobody's believing me. Like, what do I do? You know what I mean? So
Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, did they have library there? Did they let you read books?
no, no, they
No.
were. I mean, I tell people this and they think I'm exaggerating, but it was really kind of a Nazi re-education type vibe.
Yeah.
Like we were allowed the Bible and only the King James version of the Bible, very specifically, and we weren't allowed to watch TV unless it was like Fox News, and it had to be Fox News without the commercials. And when we watched anything, like when they watched football or something, they cut the commercials out. We couldn't read newspapers. We had no idea what was going on. All of our letters were censored in and out. Our phone calls were monitored, so we can't say anything. And they tell you that's like the first thing your buddy tells you. One of the first things staff tells you is if you write something negative about this place home, you're going to be in a world of hurt. And so you just don't do that. You know what I mean? I've seen a couple of people try to do that and go back to boot camp and get paddled, restrained, screamed at. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there's no way to tell the truth. And so you're just silenced immediately. You know what I mean? Like, so.
Okay. Did you hear about or did you know about any drug use going on with the staff or any staff giving any students drugs, anything like that? Like,
Actually, yes, there's a couple of different incidents that have occurred at Agape over the years with horse tranquilizers. And
interest.
so,
So
yeah,
ketamine.
so
Yep.
ketamine, yep. And I was actually offered some by one of the staff members that they later fired, and we even heard about when we were in there that that's what had happened. But I didn't really realize till later it was ketamine. But but yeah, he was like high, and we were playing basketball, and he's like looking at the clouds, and he's like, "Yeah, I just did some horse tranquilizers. You want some?" And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Never mind." And I'm like, and then like somebody told me when I like later I connected with some of the survivors, and a couple of them were like, "Yeah, that guy like got caught like doing them with some of the students." So there was that going on. I don't know what other drugs might have gone on.
Okay. Did you hear about or did you know about any sexual abuse going on between the staff or the students, or any
Yes.
inappropriate things? Okay. What do you know?
Yes, unfortunately, Agape is really bad for that. So, I talk about it on my TikTok for exposing Agape, and I also talk about it. I've talked about it on my Twitter, the grooming process that they do. So they try to get young boys to stay on, and sometimes they'll suggest maybe they can date their daughters. They did that to me. Brian Clemenson did that. Other people have done that. Uh, Robert Graves used to be a student there. He's married to a Clemenson daughter. Scott Dumar, who's charged with abuse, was a student there. He's married. He was married to a staff daughter. And so, like, you got to ask, like, how does that happen? I guess it could legally happen where somebody could go to the school and then, like, say after they're 18 and then hook up. But that just seems very groomy to me.
Seems like
Uh,
a stick to me.
and then Anna Cleveland also is rumored to have had sex with a boy that was 17, underage, in the freezer down in the kitchen a few times. People knew what was going on, didn't do anything about it, I guess. And so there's been some sex abuse there. There has been some sex abuse allegations from students regarding some of the staff. There's been a couple of students that have claimed that other students sexually abused them, and the staff didn't do anything about it or didn't stop it. So there's a lot of sexual abuse, sex abuse stuff that's been going down at Agape. I knew a former student that, uh, that had sex with one of the staff daughters on the chapel floor, like up by the altar. So, I mean, they caught him in there. He was like, he was in that gray shirt status I was telling you about. He turned 18. He was thinking about becoming staff, and then that happened. So they don't. There's a lot of like sexual repression, I think, going on, or stuff because they don't let the women even wear pants. They have to wear like skirts and like. I just think like there's something going on there that's causing them to just be creeps. But that yeah, there's a lot of really horrible sexual stuff that goes on.
Well, also, it could also be a way to lure them into a trap, like in a way, like saying, "Yeah, you can duck, or you can date my daughter, right?" And then they end up having sex or whatnot, or they don't have sex at all, and then they say, "Hey, you raped my daughter," or something to entrance you into staying there long.
Yeah, there
No,
is that. And then
but
also they shame you a lot. Like, so yeah, it's uh,
so it could also be that. What's the craziest thing that you heard about happening there, or that you witnessed?
um well, I mean there is that's
I mean,
tough.
it doesn't just have to be one, man. It doesn't just have to be one. You can.
I can give you a couple examples. There's this one kid that was sitting next to me on the wall, and we had been there for a little while. I'd been there for a week. He had been there for about a month though.
What
And
is the wall?
the walls when you're sitting or standing, you have to stare at the walls. Kind of like isolation
Oh,
because you're off on the wall and you can't do anything else.
sensory
Um,
deprivation.
yeah, exactly. It's a form of torture, and like
It's
from what
white
I
torture.
understand.
It's called white
Yeah,
torture. Yeah.
and so like yeah, and then if you looked off the wall, you had to do push-ups or whatever. Like it just kind of made it hell for you. This kid just lost it, and he was sitting next to a window seal, and the window seal was wood, but it was sharp, and he just started bashing his head into the windows. still, and he cracked his skull open and was bleeding, and it like bled onto me. And they came and they tackled him, and they like with a lot of force, and then they dragged him up, and I never saw that kid again. And then later, like he wrote some letter saying I'm okay, and everybody's like, that didn't sound like it was written by that guy. And
Yeah.
like it was like he was like at some other institution for the mentally ill, and like he was getting the care he needed, and all this weird lingo that he would just never use. And
Yeah.
like I was like, dude, did he die? Like I don't know what happened to that kid. So that was pretty intense. I saw another kid that he ended up getting his uh he ended up getting his shoulder dislocated working with the
Yeah.
horses, and they didn't believe him. They thought he was just trying to go to the doctor to try and run away or something, and so they wouldn't. They were just left him. He was like freaking out, like screaming on the floor for like 45 minutes, and they finally took him to the doctor and found out, yep, yeah, dislocated shoulder the whole time. They just, I have a scar on my finger still where I had a bunch of stitches, like 7 or 8 stitches, and it's because a grill scraper cut me to the bone when I was working on the grill, and I just bled out like a whole sink full of blood, like one of those industrial sinks full of blood before they finally said, okay, you probably should go to the doctor. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, we're not gonna. This is not a band-aid material. You know what I mean? Like, and so I saw a lot of really crazy stuff. I saw a kid that he has his appendage, Vernon, his appendage, appendix burst or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, appendix burst, and so he like looked like a Simpsons character, and like almost died because he was sick and they didn't pay attention and to him, and they thought he was lying or whatever, and so they didn't take him to the doctor, and so I've just been waiting to hear that somebody died there, but luckily we haven't had anybody that I know of die on campus, but we've had some suicides afterwards. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Let's see. Fuck, I just had a brain fart. Um, what do you think it's gonna take to get get this school shut down?
Oh, I don't know. So, and if you go back through at exposing Agape on Twitter or on TikTok or on Facebook or whatever, you're gonna see just what my frustration is here. We started uh, calling the Cedar County Sheriff's Department, which is the local authority. Robert Graves, an ex-student who works for Cedar County Sheriff's Department, is also on the staff over at Agape. It's okay.
It's
And
fine. I love
so,
cats. I have a cat too.
yeah, she's precious. I love Athena, goddess of war. Yeah, but she's my therapy cat. She
Hell
helps.
yeah.
But so we started contacting them, and we couldn't figure out why they weren't doing anything right. And then we later find out that Robert Graves works for the sheriff's department and Agape. And then we started looking into it, and his daughter, who is Clemenson's granddaughter, James Clemenson is the owner, right? He married into the Clemenson family. Robert Graves did. His grand, so James Clemenson's granddaughter was working dispatch at the Cedar County Sheriff's Department. So when we're calling in, they're just burying those reports. And so I did a records request to try and figure out where these reports were going, and like, yeah, sure enough, they just get filed and nobody does anything about them, and like nobody investigates them for like 20 years. And so it took us coming and getting it into the Kansas City Star before lawmakers felt like they had egg on their face and they had to do something. They're embarrassed, and
Yeah.
so they said something. They started talking about something, and the Cedar County Sheriff's Department. Well, if there's a conflict of interest, then we'll have somebody else investigate. The Highway Patrol jumped to the opportunity because they've been picking up runaways from places like Agape for years. And then they have these runaways that tell them stories about how they got beat up or sexually abused, and then they have to bring them back to these places. In Missouri, until we passed this law last year, they facilities didn't have to have any. They didn't have to register with the state. They didn't have to do background checks. They didn't have to say how many students are there. So you could just open up if it was a religious school, right? So if you use religious exemptions, or for a religious group home or school, you could just open up and not tell the state you even exist. And then when the highway patrol picks up these runaways, they have to bring them back there to some place that they didn't even know existed before, where this kid's saying he got abused. So you can see how the highway patrol would be kind of interested in see what's going on there. And they actually found a bunch of charges, like 65 charges or something. The AG had a bunch of charges that he was going to charge, supposedly. And then this local prosecutor, Ty Gaither, said, no, actually, I have jurisdiction. And he lowered 65 charges down to what was it, 5 charges or 7 charges for 5 people, I think. And so, and they're all low level felonies, so they could get pleaded down to misdemeanors. And then
Yeah.
that would mean that they would pass our background checks, which look for felonies that we passed. So it's an obvious corrupted thing to try and get around. We put in that the judges, that the prosecutor's corrupt. He also sponsored a kid to go to Agape, and he was just recently. Ty Gaither was recently in the newspaper bragging about going to church at Agape, going there and hang out with students. These are not things that a prosecutor should be bragging about, right?
Yeah.
You're supposed to be prosecuting them, not going easy on them, chumming it up with them. Like there's something wrong here. And so we've been trying to get a different prosecutor for it. The AG's frustrated with it. He wrote for an injunction, but not until just recently. So he's been sitting on this for like a
Yeah.
year, talking about his Senate race and suing Biden and doing all these other things. But really, what needed to happen was last year when we had all these abuse claims that came out, all these reports, and then passed the law. They should have gone and done that safety injunction back then. But now they're trying to do it now, and it's just it's been delayed 9 times in the courts. And last time I checked, the 14th, they canceled the trial at 3:30. So I have no idea what's going on. I know that the Missouri Supreme Court's involved. That they're trying to that they're supposedly still trying to shut down Agape, but it's just they're not giving us any updates really. I have to find everything out through CaseNet, and so it's just really, yeah, I don't know. It's frustrating. So when you say what is it going to take, I don't know. I mean, there's 23 lawsuits. There's over 4,000 signatures that my change.org petition. We passed a law. Um, you know what I mean? I don't know. People are charged. We've had it in the Kansas City Star every couple of weeks for several years, and also in other. I just don't know anymore. I wish I knew. I wish I knew the magic bullet, the silver bullet, right? But I don't know what is going to bring Agape down. I'm hoping that this injunction will eventually succeed or whatever, or it'll get shut down. But well, like we've seen with so many of these WASP places, they can't just reopen, and
Yeah.
so that's kind of a problem.
For sure, for sure. So your parents, have you talked to your parents about how it made you feel when they sent you away? Do you have a relationship with your parents now? Do you think that you could forgive them? My thing is, before you answer, my thing is, I've forgiven my parents, but I'm never going to forget that they did that, and I'm never going to forget how it made me feel. So my question to you is, do you think you could ever forgive your parents? Maybe forgive but not forget, and just how is your relationship with your parents?
Well, I don't talk to them anymore.
Okay.
I don't. I'm completely estranged from everyone in my family, almost, and it sucks, but it's just the way it is. Look, when I got out, I went through this phase of trying to talk to them about what happened to me over and over again. You know what I mean? And tried to explain, tried to explain. Uh, it never worked. And my dad's a bit of a different situation because he was transporting kids when I got out to
Yeah.
places like Agape. So he's profiting off of people's suffering and part of the problem. You know what I mean? And
Fuck yeah.
exactly. When I told him, hey, look, I look at you like a human trafficking person. Like that's how I look at you. I mean, that was pretty much the end of our relationship. You know what I mean? Like, so I tried for a while to convince him to stop doing the business that he was doing, and then eventually Senator Sarah Gelser Bluin and I and some survivors passed some legislation in Oregon that makes it so those transport companies have to register as child care facilities, and it's like really hard for them to do that, and so a bunch aren't basically just not happening anymore. It basically made it shut it down so you can't really transport kids out of state like that. um, and then some uh, stuff about restraints and stuff, which make it pretty difficult for those people to goon people. So now his business is shut down. He may be working under the radar, but yeah.
Okay. Um, what? So you worked kitchen, right?
And my mom's like one of those 1950s housewives. She's always like denied any abuse. Like she's watched my dad choke me out and said it didn't happen, kind of thing, and like cries and then like acts like it didn't happen. Doesn't have any opinions of her own. Sad,
Okay.
just the way it is. What were you saying? I'm sorry.
You said you worked kitchen in the program, right?
Yeah, so I did work the kitchen in the program. I worked both sides of the kitchen at different times. So I worked the grill on the kitchen side, where like they cook the food and stuff, and I would just like clean the grill and like just pretty hard work, but and then clean the vents, and then I worked in the pots and pans section sometimes, where I scrub all the pizza pans and big pots and stuff where you cook all the stuff in it for the kids.
Okay. And I forgot to ask this earlier, but out of all the food there, what was your favorite meal there? Or the thing that was the most bearable?
I mean, I think we all love the spaghetti nights. Spaghetti nights were nice. We had, ice cream pancakes every year around Christmas, which was kind of cool. Um, I particularly liked, there was a Vietnamese stir fry that uh, that they made. It was pretty good, but I don't. Uh, yeah, that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
I like I said, I think the food there at Agape, probably the least disturbing of the
yeah,
things. Yeah, but
okay. Do you I know I kind of already asked this, but did you hear about any staff members having full-on like relationships with the students?
yeah, like I said, I believe Anna Cleveland was working there. She's a staff daughter, but she was working there sometimes in the kitchen and stuff. And she had sex with a 17-year-old boy in the freezer numerous times, and people knew about it and didn't do anything about it. I have to imagine that people like you know Scott Dumar and uh, uh, and the other people that married into staff daughters probably had similar things happen, and then stayed on, or maybe they hooked up after they were 18. It's just a very sleazy vibe. And they do. I have heard of some of the younger boys in the Bucky Tucker dorm when I was there. Alan Knoll was there at that time, and then he was pretty young, and there was a couple of different people that were there in that dorm that watched after that dorm, and I heard some funny things. I just some fuzzy things about maybe some touching and some exposure and things that shouldn't have happened. And so I'm not exactly sure, how much of that still is going on. I know that they have DSS agents that were supposed to be there watching around the clock right now, but I don't know how much faith I have in them either.
Okay. And did you guys go to church there? I know that going to church is like part of a lot of these religious places, so.
Yeah, forced to go to chapel every night, and then to church on Wednesday night and then church Sunday morning, Sunday night, and guest evangelists from like the roll off uh, IFB network, stuff like that, Liberty University, Falwell University, sometimes just a bunch of different speakers would come in.
Okay. All right. Well, is there anything else you want people to know about your experience at the program? Or hold on. Knowing what you, or hold on, I have three more questions. I fucked
Okay.
up. Uh,
Very good.
so, um, if you could go back in a time machine and not go through this program, would you do it and why?
Yeah, no doubt. If I could go back in a time machine and not go through this program, that would be amazing, right? I would totally do that.
Okay. And is it your opinion, knowing what you know now, that these places could or even or should or even could be shut down or fully regulated, or is it your belief that they should all just be shut down?
Well, I mean, I think that's a complicated thing, right? I think boarding schools could be okay if but I don't really think teens should be out of the home. I think generally speaking, teens should be at home, but the more forced a program is, the worse it is. Like there are my brothers and sisters of my birth family. They went to like a Christian boarding school. It wasn't forced. It was Pensacola in Florida, and they loved it. I guess they're just different than me. I mean, that's fine. But it was a very different thing being forced to go someplace.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, is there anything else you want people to know about your experience, or anything that you might tell a parent thinking about maybe sending their kid to a program like this? Anything else, like closing thoughts?
Don't. Don't send your kid to a program like this. It can have lifelong consequences. I have CPTSD. I have major depressive disorder. I have night terrors every night. I've had two spine surgeries. I have sciatica, so I have chronic pain every day. Shooting pain down my left leg. I'm disabled. I have Social Security disability. I mean, don't let your kid be me, right? And it's not just me. There's plenty of us that are pretty messed up after the programs that we went through. And also, a lot of us don't talk to our parents anymore. You've forgiven your parents, and that's great. And you know what? I've tried to forgive my parents, and I think I've forgiven them, but I think I had to separate because it's just too toxic.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of us did that, and I just think it's just not worth it, to risk your relationship with your kid long term. Get him to like a counselor, get him to a doctor, get him to some place but also check on that too. Don't let him just get like overly medicated or like stuck in some psych ward. But like be there and be involved in your kid's mental health. Ask them what's going on. A lot of these people that ended up in the troubled teen industry may have been autistic or just had home issues. Some of them were being molested or something, and they're acting out. You know what I mean? I've heard all kinds of stories, seen all kinds of things. And so the more engaged a parent is in a child's life, and the sooner they're engaged in that, and the more honest they are too, because as we become teenagers, I mean, if that trust breaks down, right, that's everything. So build that trust up with your kid. Be honest with your kid. Be real with your kid instead of sending them off to some program to try and beat something into them. And you'll be happy that you did. I think that that's kind of my last words.
Okay. And I actually thought of one more question when you were
Oh, okay.
replying. Did you ever hear about, did they medicate students there, first of all? Like if you had ADHD and you were on prescriptions before you went there, would they medicate you there?
No, they take you off of them.
Okay.
And so that had disastrous effects sometimes. People withdraw, you know, glad nobody got seriously hurt that way because some medications you can. So, no, they did not. They were like anti-medicine to like an extreme too. Like I don't know. I think psych meds personally, I've benefited sometimes from some of them, and I understand some people don't, and that's all personal preference. But when you take a kid who doesn't know what's going on, just rip them off their meds. It's pretty traumatic.
For sure, for sure. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And would you be
Yeah,
open to
thanks for
a
having
part
me.
two? Would you be open to a part two someday, just to maybe check in with you, see how you're doing?
Yeah, I'm open to that. Yeah, thanks for having me on, and yeah, that sounds great.
For sure, for sure. Well, you have a wonderful day, man. Thank you so much. And also, if you haven't liked and subscribed, please, I invite you to do that. It really helps the algorithm. And make sure you hit the notification bell so you get updated when new videos drop. Other than that, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out.